Hi, my name is Jackson Burkholder, and today I'm going to talk about some preliminary research on the structure of extrafloral nectaries in Cactaceae, the cactus family. First off, what is an extrafloral nectary? This refers to any nectar-producing structure that is either formed on vegetative parts of the plant or is not used in the plant pollination process. In today's talk, I'm first going to give a brief introduction to extrafloral nectaries in the cacti. Next, I'm going to talk about the types of nectaries that have been identified from this family. Then finally, I'm going to discuss some of the preliminary results from the research that I'm working on. Before we look at the nectaries specifically, I thought I would give a brief overview to cactus anatomy, or some special features of cactus anatomy that will help us understand where the nectaries are located in relation to other parts of the plant. First off, the sharp pointed appendages that come off of cacti are called spines, and this refers to, like I said, a sharp pointed structure that results from modified leaf tissue. These spines come from small pad-like soft or short shoots, often covered in this soft wool called areoles, and these are the growing points of the cacti. These structures are unique to the cactus family. They're one of the things that makes cacti cacti. And these are just short shoots where the modified leaves, the spines, as well as branches and flowers originate from. Next, we'll look specifically at a cactus flower, as they are the location of some nectaries. And cactus flowers are probably, or this structure here, this is an unopened cactus flower, is probably more appropriately called a flowering branch. And this is because the flower is embedded within stem tissue. Because of that, we can see the same features we saw in cactus stems, or at least very similar features. We've got areoles, just like we saw in the stems, as well as spines coming from those areoles. Oftentimes on the flowering branches of cacti, we have what people think of a more traditional plant leaf. You can see the leaves here with the areoles, the buds or growing points in the axillary position. Now I'll give a brief introduction to extrafloral nectaries in the cactus family. These structures were first identified in the cactus family in 1894 by the German cactologist W.F. Ganung. There's been a couple studies on their anatomy since then. There was a couple done in the 1950s by the famous cactus anatomist Dr. Norman Boak, and then another study done in the 1980s by another famous cactus anatomist, Dr. Mouseth. So they basically worked on a couple different species of North American species that have these nectaries, but there's a lot of other cacti that have them that really haven't been studied. But more recently, Dr. Mouseth published a review paper where he identified, and the collaborators identified, 4 different types of extrafloral nectaries, broad categories within the cactus family. And so this is going to be kind of the basis for a lot of the research I'm doing, and we'll talk about that later in the presentation. What is the purpose of cacti having these nectaries? The main thing is to attract insects, and the main insects that are attracted to them are ants. There's a number of benefits that these ants that are hypothesized that these ants have on the plants. Some of those are that the ants can help clean the plant of debris, as well as harmful insects, and deter harmful insects. Another one is having ants around the base of the plant encourages flying insects to pollinate the flowers, because flying insects can move pollen greater distances. This can increase outcrossing of the plants as well. But like I said before, there has been a few studies done on the anatomy, but in a wide variety of plants with nectaries, no real anatomical studies have been done. And so that's what I'm hoping to do with my research. Now I'll talk about the 4 different types that were identified by Dr. Mouseth et al. In the 2016 review paper. Like I said, this is going to be kind of the framework for the research that I'm working on. Type 1 nectaries are specialized club-shaped structures that are thought to have originated from highly modified spines. These are the most advanced form of nectaries that can be found in the cacti. And it's kind of interesting that they are found in 2 evolutionarily separate groups. the Cactaceae, the ball and barrel cacti, as well as the Opunctioideae, the prickly pears and choyas. Type 2 nectaries are superficially unmodified spines. They are really difficult to tell from just regular cactus spines, but they excrete nectar. Type 3 nectaries are the small foliage leaves, kind of like I showed on the picture of the cactus bud, that secrete nectar from those leaves. Type 4 nectaries are regions of epidermis directly below the areoles where nectar comes from. These are the most simple type of nectaries. It's just a patch of epidermis that oozes nectar. First off, here are some pictures of some cacti native to Texas that have type 1 nectaries. Things like the Glory of Texas, Delocactus bicolor, cacti like that. Now we'll look at some of the nectaries in more detail. This is what a type 1 nectary looks like. You can see it comes out of the areole right next to the spines. There's a spine right there. And it's just this little kind of club-shaped structure. And nectar builds up underneath the cuticle. And as soon as enough nectar has built up, it bursts through and starts to ooze. They can be born singly, like the picture we just looked at, or there can be more than one per areole. You can see a cluster of them on this areole here. They can also arise in a linear fashion along the length of the areole. Here's the elongated areole of a glandula cactus. You can see a little row of nectaries above where the spines come out. Nectaries can also originate at the base of the tubercle. So this structure right here, the pointed structure that has this areole on top, is called a tubercle. And you can also have nectaries that form at its base. Some plants, like this Coryphantha glassi, have nectaries in both locations. So here you can see the nectary coming out with the spines at the tip of the tubercle, and then on the very same plant, the nectaries also form at the base of the tubercle. You can see here's where the tubercle is, and there's a nectary here at its base. These same sort of nectaries, you can see the little club-shaped kind of spine-like structures, can be found in, like I said, a totally unrelated group of cacti, the choyas. So here's an example of a choya native to West Texas, Cylindropuntia imbricata, where we can see those same type 1 nectaries on the areole. Now we'll look at type 2 nectaries. This is a picture from the Mouseth et al. Review paper. You can see these spines look quite similar to just regular cactus spines, except for the fact that they have little beads of nectar being secreted from them. Now we'll look at the type 3 nectaries. This is another picture from the Mouseth et al. Review paper. And you can see this flowering branch. This is like a flower bud here. Here's the areoles with the spines, and then the areoles are in the axillary position to these leaves, the foliage leaves, and you can see where the foliage leaves are secreting drops of nectar. Now we'll move on to the simplest, most basic type of nectary, the type 4 nectaries. And you can see them here, just these little patches of epidermis underneath the areoles have these little drops of nectar coming out of them. So now we'll look at some of the preliminary results from my research so far. I've mainly looked at type 1 nectaries, like this one here. So the first slides that I'm going to show pictures of represent a section taken, a cross-section taken of the nectary in this plane right here. You can see here's the nectary. It's kind of hard to see looking at them from the top in the other pictures that they are club-shaped, but here we get a good image of the club-shaped nature of these nectaries. They are divided into 3 main parts. The first is the cuticle, which I mentioned previously. You can see it's intact in this specific nectary. The next is this head made of secretory tissue. These tightly packed cells with dense cytoplasm, which produce the nectar itself. And then finally, we have a vascularized stalk. You can see a little bit of vascular tissue. We'll be able to see it better in the next slide. And then the vascularized stalk is covered in trichomes. So these are the three main parts. These nectaries are fed from the xylem of the plant through that vascularized stalk to the secretory tissue. And after this nectary stops producing nectar, the head with the secretory tissue will fall off, but the vascularized stalk will remain. Here's another slide showing the type 1 nectary of a different species, a Coryphantha. Here we can really see a good image of the vascular tissue that is in this lower portion of the nectary. And it feeds the secretory tissue up here. Next, we'll look at a longitudinal section through the nectary in this plane. It looks like this. You can see here is the areole. This tissue right here is the tissue that makes up the spines. Before sectioning, the spines were cut off to make sectioning a little easier. And you can see that the areole, or the nectary, is closely associated with the areole. It kind of starts up here with these trichomes, and then you can see a little more trichomes down here on the lower side of the nectary, above where the spines start to come out. So it is associated with those, with that structure. You can also see the vascular trace really well in this picture that feeds that vascularized stalk through the xylem of the stem. And that is just about it for my talk. I hope everybody enjoyed it and learned something about the extrafloral nectaries and cacti, and thank you for listening.